The sun was falling low behind the cottonwoods when Clara Wynne went down to the river. The air had that heavy stillness before dusk, and the reeds whispered like a secret being told to no one. She knelt on the muddy bank with her husband's last shirt in her hands, its threadbare fabric catching the light. The current lapped at her wrists as if asking her to let go. For a long while she didn't move, just watched her reflection shiver on the surface, the face of a woman she barely knew anymore. They said the river took what it wanted. That evening, it wanted her. Her foot slipped on the slick rock, and before she could cry out, the current caught her skirt and yanked her down. Water filled her mouth, cold, raw, tasting of earth and grief. She thought of her husband's grave on the hill, of the silence that had lived in her chest since the day they put him under, and she did not fight it at first. The world became a blur of blue and brown until strong arms broke through the current and pulled her back toward light. When her eyes opened, she saw him, Eli Mercer, the quiet cowboy who worked the Snake River Range. His coat was thrown around her shoulders, his breath coming hard. They sat on the bank beside a small fire he'd built, her hair clinging to her cheeks, her dress heavy as a net. "You shouldn't have," she whispered, coughing river water. "Didn't plan to," he said simply. They didn't speak again for a long while. The crackle of fire was the only sound, and the steam rising from her dress curled into the cool air like spirits returning home. When he finally stood, he offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it by the time he led her horse back toward town. The light had gone gold and pink. Her body trembled, her heart stranger still. The next morning, tongues wagged before breakfast. Widow Wynne pulled from the river, with Mercer. No less. Liza May Turner whispered to her husband in the general store. A woman alone's bound to stir up something. Sheriff Pike leaned against the post outside, spitting tobacco. "Some women just can't keep out of trouble," he said, voice low but meant to be heard. Clara felt every word when she passed through town. The whispers followed like flies on a wound. She carried her basket close to her chest, kept her eyes on the dirt road. At home, she scrubbed the floor though it was already clean. Her hands shook, not from shame but from the need to make something right again, anything. That night, as wind moaned around the corners of her little house, there was a knock on the door. When she opened it, Eli stood there, hat in hand, rain dripping from his brim. He held out the coat she'd left by the fire. "You forgot this," he said. She hesitated. "You didn't have to bring it. Didn't seem right to keep it." Their eyes met, his gray steady, hers wide and unsure. For a moment, the whole room seemed to still. "Thank you," she whispered. He tipped his hat and turned to go, but she found herself saying, "Would you like some coffee?" He paused, rain dripping from his collar, then shook his head gently. "Not tonight. Just keep warm." After he left, she stood for a long time staring at the coat folded over her chair. The faint scent of smoke and river clung to it. She pressed it to her chest and felt the warmth of something she'd forgotten, care that asked for nothing back. The next few days passed like the soft ticking of a clock. She found a bundle of shirts left on her porch, torn and dirt-stained. A note inside read only, "Thought you might fix these." She mended them by lantern light, her fingers brushing the threads as if they were part of something holy. Each stitch became a word she couldn't speak aloud. The townsfolk kept their distance, suspicion thick as dust. In the saloon, Pike smirked. "Mercer's keeping that widow busy, I hear." But Eli said nothing. And Clara, too, learned the strength of silence. One evening, thunder rolled far off over the hills. She dreamt of drowning again. The pull of the river, the weight of her dress. When she woke, the wind was shrieking around the eaves and rain hammered the roof. She rose, lit a lantern. The light trembled on the walls. Then came another knock. When she opened the door, Eli was there again, soaked through, his horse tied to the fence. "I heard the river," he said, voice low and rough. "Wanted to make sure you weren't down there again." She stood there, rain glinting on her lashes. The warmth in his eyes broke something open in her chest. "Why do you care?" she asked softly. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "'Cause I know what it's like to get pulled under." Her throat tightened. The lantern flame flickered between them, casting their faces half in gold, half in shadow. The storm howled beyond the walls, but inside, the world was small and quiet. She set the lantern down, her hands trembling. The words slipped out before she could stop them. raw, unplanned, aching with honesty. Will you stay if I undress? It wasn't an invitation. It was a confession. The air went still. He didn't move, didn't speak. The rain filled the silence. And in that fragile breath between shame and mercy, the story began to change. Eli didn't answer right away. The question hung in the air like smoke, soft and dangerous. Clara's cheeks flushed, her eyes searching his face for understanding, not desire. She wasn't asking him to touch her. She was asking him to stay, to see her without the armor she'd built out of grief and gossip. He stepped forward slowly, removed his hat, and set it on the table. Rainwater ran down his shoulders, darkening his shirt. I'll stay, he said quietly, but only if you keep your heart dressed. She breathed out, shaky, half a sob, half a laugh. I don't know if I can. Then I'll help you. He replied. He found the old blanket draped across the chair and wrapped it around her shoulders. They sat by the fire in silence, the only sound the steady hiss of rain against the windows. The flames painted their faces in amber, and for the first time in years, she felt warmth that didn't hurt. He didn't touch her hand, didn't lean close. He just stayed. When morning came, the world outside was a soaked hush. Mist hung over the river, and the town glistened with new mud. Clara stood at the window, watching Eli saddle his horse. She thought he might leave without a word, but he caught her gaze through the rain and gave a small nod. One of those gestures that meant more than a dozen promises. By noon, the whispers had returned. Sheriff Pike tipped his hat toward Liza May Turner as she swept the porch of the general store. Mercer's been staying up at the widow's place, he drawled. Ain't proper, if you ask me. Liza sniffed. Oh, I don't have to ask you. Everyone knows what happens when a woman loses her shame. Clara heard them as she passed by, her shawl pulled tight. Her face stayed calm, but her heart thudded like hooves in her chest. Inside the store, the talk dropped to a hush when she entered. Coins clinked too loudly on the counter. She paid for her flour, met their eyes one by one, and said softly, "Ain't shameful to be saved." Then she walked out. The narrator might have said it best. In a place where words were cheaper than wheat, dignity cost a lifetime. Later that day, Eli found her hanging laundry in the yard. The sky was wide and bruised from the storm. She told him about the whispers. He listened without looking at her. They'll tire of it sooner than truth, he said. What's the truth, Eli? That I ain't here for them. Her hands stilled on the wet cloth. For a moment, it seemed enough. A week later, the river swelled again after a night of thunder. By dawn, someone shouted in the distance, flames near the old cabin on the far bank. It was her late husband's place, left empty but not forgotten. Clara ran before anyone could stop her, skirts flying, bare feet slapping against the wet dirt. She reached the clearing to find the cabin swallowed in orange light, the fire roaring like a thing alive. She coughed against the smoke, eyes streaming. Inside, the walls she once painted with her husband were collapsing. But on the table, she could see it through the window, was his Bible, his hat, his ghost. Eli rode in fast behind her, calling her name. Clara, don't. She turned, tears streaking her face. I can't lose him again. You already did, he said gently, stepping toward her through the smoke. Now you gotta let the fire finish what the river started. She shook her head, sobbing. I can't. He grabbed her wrist, firm but kind, and pulled her back as the roof caved in with a groan. The flames leapt high, reflecting in her eyes like sorrow turned to light. They fell to the ground together, coughing, watching everything she once was burn away. For a long time, neither spoke. When the fire finally died, Clara whispered, Now I have nothing. Eli looked at her, ash dusting his face. No, now you have space for something new. The words hit deeper than comfort. They were truth, raw and redemptive. She looked at him, and in his quiet eyes saw no pity, only presence. The kind that said, I'll walk beside you, not ahead. The town gathered by evening, whispering again, this time not about scandal, but about the woman who'd faced the fire and didn't flinch. Sheriff Pike offered his hat awkwardly. Sorry about the cabin, he muttered. She nodded once. It was time. When he left, she turned to find Eli standing by her fence, hands in his pockets, face half lit by the dying sunset. She went to him, slow and sure. I don't know what happens next, she said. He smiled faintly. We live, I reckon. The next morning came soft and pink. The river ran clear for the first time in weeks, carrying no debris, only light. The world smelled of ash and new beginnings. Clara poured 2 cups of coffee. When she turned, Eli was already there, hat in hand, boots muddy from the yard. "You still staying?" she asked quietly. He set the hat down on the same table where she'd first offered her heart in fear. "You still a skin?" She smiled. The steam rose between them, curling like breath in the cold. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. Outside, the river murmured its slow hymn through the grass, and somewhere in that gentle stillness, something like love took root, not in heat or hurry, but in the steady act of staying. The story could have ended there, but the old soul who tells it always adds this part. Voice soft as wind through pine. Love don't always come like thunder. Sometimes it slips in quiet, like a man setting his hat down, like a woman finally breathing easy. Maybe that's all staying means in this world. Not leaving when the river rises, not running when the fire burns. Just being there, long enough for a soul to heal.